Let's go.
Call of Duty is one of, if not the most successful video game franchise of all time. It's been a top seller for over 2 decades now with its over-the-top cinematic action moments and addictive multiplayer and zombies mode. But how did this titan of the industry come to be, and what did it look like in its infancy, at a time where Activision's primary source of income wasn't even born yet? I want to start a series on this channel where I go through all Call of Duty games to see the franchise's rise and fall. In this series I'm going to focus solely on the single-player campaigns, because believe it or not, multiplayer used to be an afterthought in these games. I've parted the games up into 3 eras to get a better overview of what to expect. The humble beginnings, the edgy teen phase, and the silent generation. I'm gonna get to why it's called that when we get there. So we're obviously starting with the OG Call of Duty from 2003. In 1999, EA released their critically acclaimed game Medal of Honor. The filmmaker Steven Spielberg reached out to a small development team called 2015, and in 2002, they released the genre-defining game Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Allied Assault was very well received. It featured a very true recreation of the beach landing scene in Saving Private Ryan. After that game's release, many developers left 2015 to go start their own studio called Infinity Ward, where they began working on a new project called MOH Killer, or Medal of Honor Killer. This game would feature a World War II experience even more grounded and real than Allied Assault, where you didn't play as a super soldier, but just a regular soldier in a squad of other regular soldiers. They also wanted to put an emphasis on frontline combat rather than espionage and spec ops. The game was released on the 29th of October 2003 under the name Call of Duty. Call of Duty was a huge success right off the bat. It featured a good balance between being in the thick of it and Medal of Honor-esque spec ops missions. But one thing worth noting is you were always part of a squad, and your squad wasn't invincible. Once they died, they didn't just respawn. They hammer it home by writing, "In the war that changed the world, no one fought alone," in the trailer. Your squad matters in this game. The game also tries to emphasize the sheer scale of the conflict by having 3 separate campaigns from 3 separate perspectives: the American, the British, and the Soviet. Before we move along, I think it's important to keep in mind that the technological limitations of the time really hindered the ability to make large-scale battles in video games. Speaking of the trailer, it mainly consists of footage to highlight the intensity of the battle, as well as text and some Soviet propaganda. But remember what I said earlier about keeping the limitations of the time in mind? The ferocity and size of the battles depicted in this trailer and in the game itself had never been seen before in any game at this time. Even the beach landing in Allied Assault feels kinda empty after playing this game. It gets even more impressive in the next entry, but that's for the next video. So despite its simplicity, it's actually a really good trailer as it showcases the general feeling of the game and makes a pretty good case as to why you should get this game over the next Medal of Honor. I'm gonna make a few comparisons to Medal of Honor in this video, as it was the big daddy of the FPS genre at this time. The time in question being 2003. With that said, let's jump into the game itself. Oh, and by the way, since it's an old game, it doesn't really adhere to the standards of modern times resolution-wise. I tried fixing it, but couldn't. I had to deal with it, so now you have to deal with it. In the American campaign, you play as Private Martin. He's a soldier in the 506th Paratrooper Regiment in the 101st Airborne Division. You go through the Normandy landings as well as 2 rescue missions.
Switching it for your carbine. Turn to the left, move to the fence, and fire 2 rounds at your target.
Before each mission, you're greeted with a diary entry from Martin. Here he is just giving some info on where he is and what he's doing. He also explains how hard the leadership is being on them. This mission takes place in August 1942, so the concept of paratroopers was very new in the US Army at this time. As for the mission itself, it's just a tutorial mission. Martin is running some basic drills, nothing worth noting, except this guy who is a meanie panini.
Unless you're as dumb as you are ugly.
Pathfinder starts with a briefing on Operation Overlord. You are told that you, the 101st, will be securing the Deuce River crossings. You will be dropped ahead of the rest of the company to mark the landing zones with beacons. In the real thing, they had entire Pathfinder companies. They didn't just drop one guy ahead of everything like they do here. But now the first real mission starts. You get dropped just before midnight on June 5th, and I love the atmosphere here. The music, the ambience, the silence, this is the real deal. The enemy is all around you and the tension is palpable. Before long, you encounter your first German. This encounter is really just one guy. I love night levels in this generation of games. They have a certain aesthetic that I find really cool. Anyways, you move forward and find another Pathfinder dead, hanging from a tree and a bunker. You pick up the leg bag as you hear two Germans inside the bunker. You tread carefully as you approach. Once you get close enough, you toss a grenade and get both of them. You go through the bunker and into a field where you place the beacon. Then you watch as paratrooper after paratrooper comes down from the sky. Sirens blare and AA guns roar. The battle has begun. The rest of the video isn't going to be as detailed as that. I just really like that opening. The indifferent silence of the night that brings this tension that leads to the eruption of gunfire that marks the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. After your company lands, you are immediately put under heavy fire from a farmhouse. You are also introduced to the machine gunners. These guys can fuck your day up real fast, but I found it pretty easy to just pick them off from a distance. You fight your way into the farmhouse and take some damage along the way. You notice that this time there is no jelly screen and your health bar doesn't go back up. This game doesn't have regenerating health. You'll have to pick up medpacks. You can find them laying about or dropped by an enemy. If you die, you get left with a quote about war on the mission failed screen. You start going house to house, but be careful because the Germans can just pop out from behind any corner or piece of furniture. A thing worth mentioning real quickly is how loud the game is. It really assaults your ears. You're probably thinking, well duh, war is loud. But no game sounds quite like this. You eventually make it to a broken wall that leads to a trench, and that's where the mission ends. Overall, this mission leaves a good first impression of the game, loud and bombastic, but with some quiet moments. The mission itself is pretty simple though. After placing the beacon, you just move from house to house. There aren't any specific objectives. It's pretty short too. I completed it in around 6 minutes. I could find some inaccuracies from a historical standpoint, like the time is off. It says 23:30 when the first Pathfinders touch the ground at around 1:15 midnight, so it's off by 45 minutes. There are forgivable ones too, like the time between the Pathfinders landing and the rest of the force. Obviously, the developers isn't going to make you wait an hour by the beacon.
Shot, son!
Saint Mary Église opens with you coming out on the other end of the trench you entered in the last mission. You and your boys move across an open area to get to a train station when you are abruptly put under heavy fire from mortars and machine guns. This moment is very tense as you scramble for some kind of cover in this field. You fight your way to the station, and by now you've probably noticed that sometimes your squad mates' names are red or yellow instead of green. These colors indicate their health. You do some more house clearing. This room has a hole in the ceiling. You may not notice or think much of it at first glance, but once you get under it, you start getting shot at from above. It's little design decisions like these that help emphasizing the fact that danger is everywhere. After pushing forward a bit, you encounter a half-track. These are infantry transport vehicles. Gameplay-wise, they are pretty much the same as a regular machine gun, but a bit harder to hit because of the shield. A thing to keep in mind is that your squad leader will give you commands on how to do certain encounters. Like after the half-track, he tells you to charge the house from the left. The commands are scripted, but I still think it's a really cool thing. The game is designed in a way where instead of giving you an invisible wall or a barrier, it's just really hard to survive the encounter if you don't do as your officer says. You fight your way to the church and take it, but it's not over yet. You've gotten a new objective. You have to destroy 3 flak panzers. The first one is pretty easy, but the second one demanded a bit of a fight. But the third one was intense. You end up taking fire from 2 positions and one has a machine gun. After you destroy it, Captain Foley holds a speech. This is one of the trademarks of early COD, missions ending with a high-ranking official giving a speech. This mission was pretty good too. It introduces new elements to the gameplay like vehicles and blowing things up. Solid mission, had fun the 10 minutes I was playing it. In the next mission we fast forward a dozen hours to dawn. The mission starts with you immediately being bombed by mortars. After the mortars stop, Private Johnson, another soldier, is sent to investigate a building across the street where he's shot dead.
Got him. Damn.
The fighting picks up again and you are greeted with the menacing sound of an engine and squeaking tracks.
We got Tiger moving in from the east!
Before long, a Tiger tank rolls up. To destroy the tank, you have no other choice but to run through the gunfire to the church and pick up a Panzerfaust. I died a couple times trying to get to the tank, and the first time I got there I think I missed. After dealing with the tank, you go back into the church to hold back another German assault. After repelling that, you go into another part of town. Here you push back another German wave. Then the shelling continues. But then another tank rolls into the area. Its machine gun pins you on the side of the road. You need to go back to get another Panzerfaust. I somehow got super disoriented and couldn't find my way back. I spent a minute or two just running around like a chicken with its head cut off, getting shot at until I eventually found the alley. The tank chases you back while you deal with the infantry, but eventually you get the Panzerfaust and the tank is dead meat. Now all that's left to do is take out the mortars. On the way there, you encounter another Tiger, but it plays a scripted event where some of your boys jump up on it and throw grenades into it. This next part was kinda confusing. I had to follow the road to get to the mortar positions, but none of the others followed me, so I started questioning whether I was going the right way, until I went back and I saw there was dialogue. As soon as you get to this opening, you are put under heavy fire. You can pick up this scoped Kar 98, which I did. I'm generally a big fan of sniping in FPS games. I really like this part of the mission. You are in this open field where you have to use the terrain as cover as you assault fortified German positions. It gave me the same feeling that the opening for the previous mission did. After that, you get to the mortar crews. You take them out and the mission ends with you entering a car where you are tasked to go back to Battalion HQ. It's kinda cool to see how certain names and other elements get used later in the series.
Hand this directly to Major Shepard. Tell him.
After a brief dialogue, the mission ends.
Oh man, this is nuts. I can't believe we're doing this.
Believe it, unless you sprout wings and want to fly. It's only 6 miles, Private. Just shut up and do your job.
All in all, I didn't enjoy this mission as much as the others. It was a bit longer, but the gameplay loop had started to bore me a bit at this point. Other than introducing tanks, it didn't really do anything all that interesting to me. An important thing to keep in mind when talking about single-player COD is that Call of Duty is and always has been about the spectacle rather than interesting gameplay. I'll get into that later in the video. Instead of a diary, we are greeted with a map on the loading screen, since Martin didn't have any time to write between this and the previous mission. I think it shows the route that they're driving, but I'm not quite sure. I am pretty sure that the battery marked on it is Breakhall Manor, which we will get to in the next mission. I can't remember which YouTuber said it, but they said that the most iconic COD missions all have a certain gimmick, and you can see that come into play here, as you spend the entire beginning of this mission shooting out of a car. This offers a break from the gameplay loop that you're used to at this point. You get shot at by German roadblocks as well as chased. This mission also demonstrates what I mean about COD being about the spectacle. Obviously, driving through multiple German companies in real life would have ended badly for these soldiers, and it contradicts Infinity Ward's statement about the game being more grounded in reality. But it's still in there because the spectacle of being in a car chase through Normandy is one of the things you're gonna remember well after finishing the game. Eventually, you encounter a Tiger tank that ends up putting your car out of business. You go out to look for another car, you fight through some enemies before you find a German vehicle in a garage. You defend the other two as they try and hotwire the car. After that, you're back on the road and you leave the town. Then you get this moment where the soldier driving is so frightened by what just happened that he keeps driving super fast, even though the sergeant next to him is telling him that they're safe and that he can slow down.
Cleared the German lines. You can slow down, Private. I said you can slow down.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Sorry.
And this moment brings the game back into reality. I think I would be frightened too if I had just gone through that. After that, you arrive at battalion and the mission ends. This was a good mission. It had the car gimmick, which offered a break from the gameplay loop while being intense. The mission lasts around 5 to 6 minutes, so short and sweet. I got pretty excited when I saw Breakhall Manor pop up on screen. If you don't know, Breakhall Manor is where Richard Winters sets the standard on how to assault fixed artillery positions. They also get the time of day right in this mission. I thoroughly enjoyed this mission because this is the mission where something finally clicked for me about this game and COD 2. Moving back to what I said earlier about the gameplay loop, this mission doesn't do anything interesting gameplay-wise or set-piece-wise. All you do is move through the position and destroy the guns. So on paper I should find this mission quite boring, but I didn't. Doesn't that contradict what I said earlier? It kinda does, but let me answer that with this. If you could go back in time and view a historical event with your own eyes as a ghostly observer, which event would you want to see? I sometimes ask myself this question. This is what they're trying to do here. I enjoyed the mission because not only did I observe a recreation of the Breakhall Manor assault, a very important moment on D-Day, but I got to look through the eyes of someone who was actively involved. This, to me, was the point of these games. It wasn't to tell a good story or give some interesting gameplay, but to allow you to witness what World War II might have been like. The mission itself does have some inaccuracies, like how there were no guns at the actual manor itself, so there was no fighting there like there is in this mission. We're back in the briefing room. You're told that command noticed your actions and detached your unit for some special missions. It's kind of weird to think how the first hour of this 4 to 5 hour game takes place on the same morning. I just wanted to mention that real quick. This is where the Medal of Honor part of the American campaign starts. In the next 2 missions, you save 2 British POVs, Major Ingram and Captain Price. So in this mission we go to the Bavarian Alps to do that. It starts with you approaching a checkpoint in silence. You defeat the Germans at this checkpoint and move on through the night. The music is really great here too, and the atmosphere of the opening to Pathfinder returns. Eventually you get to the actual chateau. You fight your way into it, and here we have a really cool shift in set piece. You are tasked to find Price and Ingram and take any documents laying about. Until now we've gotten used to the fields and villages of Normandy, but the rest of this mission will take place inside this chateau. There's something about moving through these hallways, through these rooms, that really reminds me of Wolfenstein, rather than Medal of Honor. Now there's no doubt that Wolfenstein had a heavy influence on the Medal of Honor games. This whole mission just has a certain class to it. It feels like a film noir or a 60s Bond movie. All in all, this mission feels like a throwback to the original Wolfenstein. Whether that was the intention or not, I don't know. But I love how simple the design of this level is. It complements the aesthetic incredibly well. I also want to take the opportunity to talk about how this game handles saving. The scripted save points can be incredibly far apart, so sometimes I'll go through an incredibly hard level and die at the end and then have to do it all over again. Luckily, the game does have manual saving. You're gonna end up using that quite a bit. After stealing some documents and destroying these radios, you finally get to Price and Ingram. But you only find Price. Price says that Ingram has been moved to a POV camp. You fight your way out and the mission ends. This is the longest mission of this campaign. I've finished it in roughly 15 minutes. Now we have arrived at the last mission of the American campaign, saving Ingram from the Dulag POV camp, which was a real POV camp by the way, that held prisoners from the RAF. You start off much like the last mission where you sneak up to the camp, but as soon as you fire your first shot, a timer appears on screen. That's right, this entire mission is timed. Then you storm through the camp in an intense firefight until you get to Major Ingram and evacuate. And I finished with 4.5 minutes to spare. I didn't enjoy this mission that much. I didn't mind the timer, it just wasn't that interesting. That concludes the American campaign. This campaign was mainly dominated by being in the thick of the war, but it had a great Spec Ops mission and one that I didn't like that much. I got through it in 1 hour and 15 minutes. It provided a strong opening to the game, as well as some pretty standout moments later on, like the car chase, Breakhall Manor and the Chateau. All in all, a solid campaign with a good mix of frontline action and Spec Ops missions. In the British campaign, you play as Sergeant Evans. He starts in the British 6th Airborne Division, but later he gets into the SOE. This campaign puts a higher emphasis on the Spec Ops side, rather than heavy fighting. The mission starts with another briefing of Operation Overlord, this time for the British. You are told to capture key bridges on the left flank of the invasion and hold them. Instead of a diary, the loading screen for the British campaign shows documents briefing the mission you are about to embark on, which fits the whole espionage and Spec Ops thing. The mission starts just after midnight on June 6th. You are in one of the gliders. The pilots get concerned as they can't recognize any landmarks, but eventually find their way back on course. This is followed by a very rough landing that somehow goes unnoticed by the Germans in Bennoville. The fighting starts pretty quickly after that. The intro to this mission doesn't really have the same feeling as Pathfinder, as that would make no sense, pacing-wise, but it's still kinda cool to sit in that glider and listen to the pilots have navigational issues. During the first firefight, you are faced with this bunker that has 3 MGs inside. I kept picking them off, but more showed, which was kind of a pain. You clear that position and advance across the bridge. As soon as you get across, a tank shows up. You are ordered to go back across the bridge and shoot the tank with an 88. The bridge provides no cover from the tank's machine guns, so you really have to just run and hope for the best. You destroy the tank, but it's not over yet, as there is still infantry present. You clear them out, and the mission is over. From a technical standpoint, this mission really only introduces you to the British forces and the fact that you can use artillery pieces against tanks. But once again, the awe of getting to see the capture of Pegasus Bridge and thinking this happened for real is what carried this mission. Solid mission, but quite short, only lasts around 5 minutes. You fast forward 12 hours to midday for this next mission. You are still holding Pegasus Bridge. You are briefly put under artillery fire, and then the first German wave shows up. You hold them off until you are told to go back across the bridge. You go across and use the machine gun to cover the retreat of the others. Then a timer shows up. You have to hold the bridge for the next 5 minutes so that reinforcements can arrive. I'm gonna be honest with you. This part gave me some gamer rage. I got a bit angry. I spent 18 minutes dying over and over and over again. You get stormed by infantry all the while you have to use the 88 to take out approaching tanks. One time I got insanely close, like within the last 30 seconds, and died, and then I had to go back to the 2-minute mark.
Penis in my mouth! Penis in my mouth!
And after this, I failed continuously for almost 10 minutes. But eventually the reinforcements showed up, and the mission was a success. This mission introduced a new element into the game that returns a few times throughout this game and in United Offensive, which is waiting for reinforcements. The ore I got from the last mission was broken by the constant trial and error on the last part of this mission. I played this game on regular, and I can't imagine doing that on veteran. This mission starts with another briefing. Sergeant Evans and Price have been transferred to the SOE. You are to destroy AA guns around the Eder Dam so that bombers can make their run. Then you will blow up some generators in the power station. You drop in during the early hours of September 2nd, 1944. You fight your way onto the dam and then move forward, destroying the AA guns one by one. After destroying the last one, a German bursts through a door, showing you a way into the dam. Gameplay-wise, the remainder of this level is very similar to the Chateau level. You move through hallways, small and large rooms, while Germans pop out from every corner. The elevators are new though, and the new environment does give it a different feeling. But I must say, playing these levels, I find this classic FPS level design very charming. The simple interior design with a few objects for cover, it is very simple but extremely good at keeping tension high. You make it to the power station and plant the charges, but you still have a few AA guns to take care of. You blow them up, and now you have to go back through the dam to meet up with Price and make your getaway. But German reinforcements have arrived. You fight your way back up, and it's a little more intense this time. You meet with Price and make your getaway in a truck. I really enjoyed that mission. It packed a lot of objectives into its 20-minute runtime. This is also a great way to keep the player engaged. I also feel that some of the enjoyment is owed to my appreciation of retro FPS games like Wolfenstein, Doom, and the original Medal of Honor. This level, as well as the Chateau level, really had a lot of influence from the level design of those games. I will say that I consider this game a retro game as well, but by having its standard level design emphasizing on bigger battles, that really puts it ahead of its time. That's right, this is another chase level. This level does set itself apart from the American chase level by giving you Panzerfaust to deal with pursuing trucks. The other trucks will also use Panzerfaust against you, and they are an instant kill. You can only take one hit from a Panzerfaust. Other than this one part where you have to cover your mate while he blows the bridge, you are constantly in chase mode. Eventually you get away from the Germans. This mission is very short. It only seems to have been put in there to add some excitement in this campaign, which focuses mainly on slower paced spec ops missions. The next mission seems to serve the same purpose. The mission opens with you and the boys entering an airfield to evacuate by plane. Eventually you stop by an AA gun. You have to use this AA gun to shoot down Stukas as they try to strafe you. This is the second time I raged. I died quite a few times, and every time I died I had to go back to where you get out of the truck. Not only that, but Captain Price constantly screams at you to only shoot at the Stukas and they will take care of the infantry, but you end up having to shoot Germans down from the roof. It's the rooftop Germans that pissed me off the most because they didn't seem to care about the other British. Eventually the plane arrives and you escape. I didn't like this mission. Either damn getaway and airfield escape could very well have been the same mission. I don't really get why they split these two parts up. Now we go to Norway on October 27th, 1944. In this mission you infiltrate the Tirpitz to find documents on the recent activity by the Kriegsmarine. It begins with you approaching the ship in disguise as German officers. There is this really cool part where Price communicates with the ship using a light. The sailor spies your disguise and lets you on board. I don't get how they didn't catch Price's accent, but I digress.
Bitte Erlaubnis, an Bord kommen zu dürfen.
You make your way down to the armory. One of the first things I noticed was how empty the ship is. This is only 7 o'clock, there should still be many sailors out and about, and the ship is out of port, so it should be fully crewed. You and Price make it to the armory where Price blows a hole into the guards. You stock up on weapons and ammo before beginning your search for the documents. You set some explosives and fight on. Even here you would think that you would get swarmed by sailors, but you don't. Again, we see some of that classic FPS design, but on a ship this time. The parts where you move on the deck between different compartments of the ship makes the set piece and therefore the level more dynamic. You find the documents on the bridge and fight your way across the deck back to the boat you came in. Upon leaving, you also get the news that Price didn't make it. This was a really enjoyable mission for the same reasons that Eiterdam and Alp Chateau was. One thing I really like is that when they reuse something like, for example, the vehicle chase levels, they always add something new to it, even if it's a relatively small thing. It's just cool to see that the devs tried to keep things fresh. That concludes the British campaign. It took me around an hour and 15 minutes again to complete this campaign, but judging by how many times I died in this and the American campaign, we can safely conclude that this was a shorter campaign. If everything had gone smoothly, it would probably only have taken an hour. This campaign was clearly more focused on the spec ops side of things. Even the Normandy missions felt smaller than the American Normandy missions. This campaign holds both my favorite and my least favorite mission in the game. Eiterdam being my favorite and Airfield Escape being my least favorite. Breakhorn Manor is a close second when it comes to my favorite. Even though my favorite mission is a spec ops mission, I feel that having an entire campaign focused on it robs the game of some authenticity. Not only are those types of missions the selling point of Medal of Honor at this time, but having one man move through an entire German position and mow everyone down is in no way grounded in reality. You do feel like a super soldier in the SOE part of this campaign, which is what Infinity Ward said you wouldn't in this game. But honestly, the Chateau level doesn't suffer from this issue because your squad moves in with you. Once again, it's kinda cool to see elements that the devs would reuse later, like Captain Price. As a matter of fact, I think when they released COD 4, they canonically made the Captain Price in this game and COD 2 Modern Warfare's Captain Price's grandfather.
Invade us with all your strength! for each and every fallen Soviet soldier, you will make...
In the Soviet campaign, you play as Corporal Alexei Voronin. This entire campaign is just frontline combat. It takes you through the Battle of Stalingrad and some missions where you approach Germany.
Without the rifle, follow! The rifle is king. A man without it.
Now we go all the way back to September 1942. The mission opens with another briefing. This time it's a short recap of Barbarossa and then explains that you will be fighting at Stalingrad. However, this briefing is a lot more emotionally charged. He brings up German atrocities and makes his hatred for the Germans very clear. He tries to inspire the men by giving them the whole glory of war spiel. You can clearly spot the massive tonal difference between the Western and the Soviet briefing. The Western is very formal and monotonal and only focuses on the objectives of the operation, whereas the Soviet has a lot more emotions involved. The loading screen here shows the not one step back order from Stalin. The mission opens with you crossing the Volga. A commissar is shouting propaganda at you while your boat is being harassed by Stukas. At one point, some soldiers try to run away, but they are shot by the commissars. During his speech, the commissar mentions that you will be well equipped, but as you get on dock and you realize that that was a fucking lie. One soldier gets a rifle and another gets a clip. The soldier with the clip follows the soldier with the rifle, and when they die, they pick up the rifle and fight on. This mission leans heavily on the movie Enemy at the Gates, where this also happens after they cross the Volga. This, however, is a myth. The Soviets at Stalingrad were actually pretty well equipped when it came to armaments, as their logistic doctrine dictated that that was the #1 priority. The Soviets would rather be well armed than well fed and comfortable. You only get a stripper clip here. So you have to charge up from the riverbank at the Germans without a weapon. This section is insanely cinematic. Already here you can see Kott's obsession with scripted cinematic moments begin to take shape. Eventually you make it near the German positions where you meet a sniper. You help him take out the machine guns on the hill, and when you get to the edge of the map, you have to enter this broken building for cover. But one problem, there's a commissar in there with strict orders to kill anyone who dares take a step back. Borodin takes him out and calls in the artillery. One thing this campaign gets right is how much the Soviets relied on artillery. Even the next level has artillery destroying German positions. This was a great mission to start the campaign. It was short, but its main purpose is to introduce you to the different tone of this campaign. It shows this off quite well. It also makes you feel like you really are in the bloodiest battle in history, which is what the Battle of Stalingrad is. This mission leans heavily on Enemy at the Gates as well. It starts with you watching your comrades retreat from the battle, and they are mowed down by a blocking unit. The next wave, your wave, is ordered to attack. As you charge forward, you finally get a rifle. You get pinned down in the square, so you take a flanking route through some buildings on the right. On your way through, you get the bullet hose, the papasha. You don't even have to aim the damn thing, just point and spray. By the way, yes, I know papasha is just PPSH in Russian, but when you come from a country where you're cursed to walk around with a potato in your throat, it's a lot easier to say papasha. I digress. Eventually, you make it to one of the top floors where you find a dead sniper. You take his rifle and begin picking off the officers to stop reinforcements from showing up. After that, you make your way back down to the stairs just in time for the fireworks. Red Square has been retaken. After that, you are ordered to bring the news to Major Zubov. As you make your way to Zubov, you get your first real taste of the filthy urban combat of Stalingrad. You get shot at from buildings, ruins, you turn a corner and boom, you're staring a machine gun in the face. The mission ends as you reach Zubov. One thing you'll notice is how Stalingrad feels really empty after the red square part of the mission. The fighting you do on your way to Zubov feels more like a minor skirmish. After that barrage, the whole level just gets super quiet. In this mission, you retake the train station of Stalingrad. When it comes to the fatigue of a repeating gameplay loop, this campaign definitely suffers the most. Watching this mission back, there's not really a lot to talk about. There were some interesting parts of the set piece like the catwalk and the trench. It's also worth mentioning that in the end of the mission you get into this really intense firefight, and after the emptiness of the last 20 minutes of gameplay, it brings back this feeling that you are currently in the bloodiest battle in history. You don't even have to aim the damn thing. In the beginning of the level, you see that you've been promoted to sergeant. Good job. Here you fight through the sewers of Stalingrad. This is definitely the Soviet campaign Chateau Eater Dam level. It brings back the classic FPS level design that I was talking about earlier. The Germans will also shoot at you through holes in the roof. Throughout the level you can hear a German trying to talk you into surrendering. Once again, I struggle to find something that I haven't said already. I am glad that they were able to implement a level like this into the Soviet campaign as well. From what I could gather before playing this game, this mission is quite infamous for being super hard, even on lower difficulties. It starts with you picking off some snipers inside the house. Then the German starts to shell your position, so you and your boys have no other choice but to charge forward towards the house. Once you reach this broken wall by the house, the Germans lay down heavy fire on you. You destroy their left flank and go around and get access to the building. Then you clear the house floor by floor. Already here I started struggling a bit, but I hadn't seen nothing yet, because after that you have to defend the house, and this is the part that made the mission so infamous. This part will crush your soul. I cannot imagine doing this on veteran. Like the Pegasus Bridge mission, you have to hold off the Germans until reinforcements arrive. This time it's only 4 minutes though. The basic premise of the mission is you have to run between 2 anti-tank rifles located on either side of the building on 2 different floors. But meanwhile, the house gets swarmed with German infantry, so every time you move between the anti-tank rifles, you have to navigate through the house while being shot at from every hole, room and staircase. Basically every opening that the barrel of a gun can fit through. I had the same thing happen to me here, where I got super close to finishing the mission but died right at the end, and had to go back to the 2-minute mark. But eventually I made it through. I ended up spending half an hour on this mission alone because of that last part, which isn't really that bad in hindsight, but it sucked while it was happening. We fast forward to the 17th of January 1945, where the Soviets have reached Warsaw. Once again, not a lot to say here that I haven't already said, but I really feel like I ought to say something because this mission has a 20-minute runtime. But you're also gonna get sick of this video if I describe every single second in minute detail. You move through the rail yard and fight a tank along the way. When I got to the tank part, I was so low on health that I ended up having to redo it a couple of times because a single round would kill me. This mission takes place 9 days after the last one. You're approaching the Oder River. During the loading screen you read that the Red Army has a shortage of tank crew. That's right, this and the next mission is a tank mission. This is where the Soviet campaign offers you a break from the gameplay loop. In this mission, you control the tank and its main turret. The machine gun is operated by AI, but when the tank loses health, you're not getting it back. So you have to make it through the entire level without dying. Luckily, these 2 tank missions are pretty short, so it's not that bad. You and your boys roll out and meet the first enemy tanks. What I like here is that they've taken the opportunity to create more variety in the enemies you're facing. Some tanks blow up after 1 hit, but others take 2 or 3. Hitting a tank in the back or the side is an instant kill, regardless of the model you're facing. Except for the Tiger, it can take 2 in the side. In this level, you mainly partake in long-range fighting across open areas, and it's really cool. I liked it a lot.
Somebody get me out of here!
Urban areas are not the ideal environment for tanks, because tanks can't see shit. So in a city or town, it's really easy for infantry to sneak up on one and take it out. Throughout this level, Germans will pop out of buildings and ruins with a Panzerfaust and take a shot at you. They remain hidden when they're not shooting, but luckily this mission has destructible environment, so you can just blow the building up. The mission ends with you destroying some flak and riding off into the sunset. And thus, the Soviet campaign is over. This campaign was the longest. It had the most missions and it took me almost 2 hours to complete. I feel like this campaign was the vision they had for the entire game. Intense frontline fighting. Some of the Stalingrad sections felt quite empty, so I think the technological limitations is what led to them including the Spec Ops missions, since they weren't quite there yet when it came to depicting huge battles. This is also the campaign where I feel the gameplay was exhausted the most. The tank missions felt so great to play after an hour and a half of standard COD gameplay. It isn't until the next entry where they fully utilize the gimmicks to keep the game interesting, but we'll get to that in the next COD video. However, there are still 3 missions left. In the end, you play one last mission as each of the characters you've been playing as during the campaigns. The briefing in the beginning of this mission sets the tone for the end of the game. Germany is on its last legs, and you are delivering the final punch as each of the allied powers you've been playing as. Festung Rekon takes place during the Battle of the Bulge in January 45. The objective of the mission is to take more bunkers northeast of Bastogne. You begin by moving through the Ardennes towards the bunkers while taking artillery fire. You also meet some German infantry. After fighting your way to the first bunker, you clear it, then you grab some documents and you're on your way again. You do the same with the next bunker. Then 2 tanks show up, you destroy them with the 88, and the mission is over. This mission was really short, but quite fun. Now we're on to the British mission. This mission takes place on the 2nd of February in Germany. In it, you must find a rocket site and destroy it. You engage the Germans right off the bat. You blow up 2 flak guns as you approach the rocket site. The level has quite a few of these observation bunkers. Be wary, some of them have machine guns in them and they will shoot through the fog, even though you can't see them. One thing I like about this part of the mission is moving through the environment. It consists of some small hills and paths. You end up having to use the terrain for cover. It does have some trenches, but they're quite small. You arrive at this checkpoint where you meet the rest of your squad. You take out some trucks together and you set off for the rocket site. One thing that's kinda stupid is that if you have a rifle with a scope on it, you can't pick up ammo for that rifle if the rifle on the ground doesn't have one, even though they're the same rifle. You make it to the rocket site. It has the rockets in the middle and they're surrounded by bunkers that have machine guns in them. You are told that you don't have enough explosives to take out all the rockets, so you have to fuel them up before blowing them up. You go around taking out bunker after bunker until you find the controls. Then you go out and blow up the rockets. You leave and the mission is over. This is the longest of the last missions. I spent around 15 minutes on it. This mission is the real final punch that ends the war in Europe. It opens with someone shouting victory or death like in Red Square. Your first objective is to destroy some 88s that will fuck up your tanks. What I really like here is how ferocious the fighting is as you move through this city. It gives the same feeling that the Stalingrad, the level, did. When you get to the flag position, you also meet a tank. You take them out and you make your final dash towards the Reichstag. You enter these ruins, take out a couple Germans and emerge on the other side. There it is. This moment is jaw-dropping. I love how it's set up. You fight through these claustrophobic streets and enter the ruins. Then there on the other side in full view is the Reichstag. The ending of the war, the ending of 6 years of bloodshed, and the deadliest conflict in history is now in sight, less than 100 meters in front of you. Now obviously the Pacific Theater is gonna continue for another 4 months after this, but this moment is just so well executed. As you begin approaching the Reichstag, you get put under intense fire that pins you, but then your tanks emerge and blow shit up. Then you make your charge. The way it plays out inside the Reichstag is actually pretty true to the real deal, the remaining Germans putting up a fierce defense for every room. The Eastern Front has been reduced from spanning the width of the entire continent to a simple hallway. You fight your way to the roof and watch as one of history's most important moments play out in front of you. The Soviet flag is waving over the Reichstag. Looking back on it, this is probably my favorite mission instead of Either Dam. My jaw just dropped to the floor playing this mission. This is the strongest I felt that awe of looking through a window to history. After the mission, a letter from a Soviet soldier is read. He talks about mopping up what's left of the Germans and looking forward to seeing his home again. He also talks about meeting the Western Allies.
Today, I crossed the Elbe River in Germany and shook hands with an American soldier. Although I could not understand anything he said, I felt this man was my brother, and I think he felt the same.
These 3 missions sum up all 3 campaigns really well. It shows the American campaign's focus on being in the spearhead and performing dangerous missions behind enemy lines. The British focus on spec ops, and the Soviet campaign where you feel like this enraged, unstoppable horde that's just steamrolling the Germans. Call of Duty United Offensive is an expansion pack developed by Grey Matter Studios. It was released on September 14, 2004, exclusively for the PC. It is an expansion pack, but it stands pretty well on its own. It is about the length of the base game and adds some new elements. Like the base game, this expansion pack was well received. I couldn't find much on the actual development of the game, but to me, when Infinity Ward said they wanted to make a more grounded experience, this is the game they had in mind. This game is intense from start to finish. Like the previous game, it features 3 campaigns where you play as the same nations but as different soldiers. However, in this game, some dissonance between the base mechanics and the more bombastic, in-your-face level design begin to arise. I'll get more into that throughout the campaigns, so without further ado, let's get into it. In the American campaign, you play as Corporal Riley, who is a part of the same regiment as Martin from the base game. The campaign takes you through the Battle of the Bulge. When the mission starts, you're at the end of a combat patrol. You have one last sweep to do. You immediately bump into an enemy patrol and a firefight ensues. Shortly after that, tanks emerge from the forest. They chase you back to the jeep and you're forced to leave one of your buddies behind. And then you get on the 50 cal. As you're being chased through the Ardennes, you accidentally go through an entire panzer division that's on its way to assault the foxholes. One of your mates gets hit in the arm, but you make it back to Field HQ. You're told to hurry out and find a foxhole. You're under heavy shelling. Trees are falling, your buddies are wounded, and almost all foxholes are occupied. Eventually you find one and begin shooting. The shelling continues as you fend off tanks, half-tracks, and the storming infantry. Eventually you're told to go to the opposite flank to use the machine gun. This is where you get a new feature in this game, light machine guns. You can pick them up, move around, and deploy them where you deem necessary. After mowing down some krauts, you go to a different foxhole to use a sniper rifle as the Sarge calls in air support. After that, you go to the right flank where the Germans have broken through. You push them back, but then the tanks arrive. You pick up a rocket launcher. In this part, you have to move between different foxholes to get a clear shot on the tanks. Then as many more tanks charge your line, Shermans arrive. The Germans retreat and the mission is over. This mission is sort of a refresher course on how the game works and what new elements there are. It is a great mission. It gets your blood pumping and shows you how this is gonna be a slightly different experience from the base game. In this mission, you have to clear the way so that the armor can get to Foy. You also have to try and find a missing patrol. You get a short briefing and you're off. Right in the beginning, you cross the field that you fought in the previous mission, which I thought was cool. As you get to the other side, a sudden firefight ensues. After that, you meet with the sentry who gives you the situation, and now you head to the crossroads. You get into this firefight by the next field over. You flank around them and get to this farmhouse on the far side. I had a lot of difficulties moving into the court, because not only are there many Germans in the area, but a machine gun in the farmhouse behind will just hit you in the back. But eventually you make it to the farmhouse, where you take a German officer as prisoner. Your boys interrogate him about the missing patrol. They smack him around for a bit and he says they're being held captive in the barn. You leave with him, but he rats you out to his fellow sewer rats. Now the race is on. You have to get to your men before the Germans go there and execute them. You get in there and find your men, who are thankfully still alive. You still have to get to the crossroads though. When you get there, your boys are taking heavy fire. You go through the German positions, taking them out one by one. I really love this part. Immediately after you take the crossroads, the Germans move in to take it back. You go to intercept them. The ambush is going really well, but a tank rolls up. Your bazooka guys are dead, so you pick one up and take out the tank. What I really love about this mission is how dynamic the environment is. You fight in trenches, the forest, a field, a farm, etc. There are also a lot of objectives and you move around constantly. This helps keep the pace high, which in turn keeps the intensity high. As the mission starts, you're immediately assaulting Foy. This part is clearly supposed to resemble the Band of Brothers depiction of the assault. You're also introduced to another new feature in this game, sprinting. After running across a field, you get pinned down behind this shed. You find out that an artillery spotter has zeroed in your tank, so you pick up a sniper and take him out. Next, you get into the actual town itself. The fighting is pretty fierce here. I died quite a few times. You fight through the houses and the streets. You even blow up a Tiger tank. You get to the church and then you do this sniper section where you have to cover your tank from Panzer Shreks. I died quite a bit here as well. This next part here is one of the examples I have for how the base mechanics and the level design clashes. You have to destroy a tiger that's blowing up your tanks, but to do that you have to cross this bridge. On the other side you have 2 German positions giving you hell. The bridge is both a choke point and the enemy's kill zone. There are hardly any med packs or real cover around. United Offensive is a lot more fast-paced and action-packed than the base game, so they throw a lot more enemies at you. This is great. The battles feel bigger and more intense, but this means you get hit a lot more. This game doesn't have regenerating health, so some parts just get insanely hard and super unfair, and you end up having to do them over and over again for a while. Luckily, I managed to do this part after only 15 minutes of trial and error. All in all, this mission and Crossroads are in a close race for my favorite mission in this campaign, perhaps even the entire game. Many objectives that keep you moving around and a shifting dynamic environment. Right here, I also noticed that even though United Offensive has fewer levels, the average mission is a lot longer, which is why it is as long as the base game. You ride into Noville on a tank. You dismount and start going house to house. After a while, they start shelling you, so you go into a basement for cover. Every exit collapses, so one of your buddies blows a hole in the wall and you move out into the street. You move up the street with the tank towards the chateau, but as you get close to the end, the tank is blown up. You fight your way up to the chateau, and this part is super cool, by the way. I know I've said it a lot and I'm gonna say it again, but I love the way Grey Matter uses the environment in these levels. You enter the chateau and go room to room. Once the chateau is clear, a German counterattack commences. After repelling the first wave, you get word that Sergeant Moody's squad is almost completely wiped. You have to go out and cover their approach. I was really dumb here. For 10 minutes I tried to go outside and kept dying over and over again. Then it finally clicked that I should use the machine gun in the window. I got a bit of gamer rage here. But this next part broke me. This is the angriest I got at this game. I almost scrapped the entire video because of this part of the mission. It's another one of those hold them back until reinforcements arrive parts. They throw everything at you in high quantity here. Tanks, half-tracks, and swarming infantry. You have to shoot at the approaching Germans, fight close quarters to go outside, and pick up a bazooka to destroy the tanks. After 30 minutes of trial and error, I got so close, some music and dialogue was playing, and I was watching the retreating Germans when this guy just randomly shot me.
Fuck you! I hope your whole family has a nice Christmas!
The next time I just huddled in the corner and that worked. I did not like this mission. This is where the dissonance that I was talking about really peaks. So many frustrating parts, and I ended up spending an hour on it. That was the last of the American campaign. It was intense and action-packed from start to finish. It had many cool moments and great level design. Simply moving through the environment was a cool experience. In the end, you also get a small cinematic recap of the events you just played through. In the British campaign, you play as James Doyle. He is a B-17 gunner turned SOE. This campaign once again has an emphasis on special operations, but let's see how this game handles it. We've been on the ground for this entire video, but now we take to the skies. This entire mission takes place on a B-17 bomber. You are the gunner. You're moving from turret to turret, fighting off enemy planes. You also have to leave the turrets to do some quick repairs. Throughout the mission, the other gunners get picked off one by one. The other bombers do as well. And the plane gets progressively more damaged. In the end, the tail of the plane flies off and you are left in a free fall over the Netherlands. But luckily, you have a parachute. This mission is just fantastic. The tension that builds as your plane gets progressively more destroyed and your crew gets smaller and smaller is fantastically well done. I also like how you can see the ground shift as you get over the Netherlands. Fantastic introduction to the British campaign. The mission starts with you dangling from a tree. A German squad sent to investigate the crash arrives. They don't notice you. Eventually, Major Ingram and some Dutch resistance fighters show up and deal with the Germans. This part looked kind of funny to me because they're just standing there across from each other shooting, and somehow the Dutch didn't take any casualties. You cut yourself down and Major Ingram explains to you that they have a train to catch and that they'll get you home after. You pick up some guns and follow the resistance fighters. You tackle this German patrol by a tunnel. The road is too active, so you cut through the forest. You get to a farm on the other side. Somehow the Germans occupying this farm didn't hear the firefight that took place barely 100 meters from them. You get as close to the farmhouse as possible and the shooting begins. While the fight is going on, this music plays from the house. That with the stillness of the night gives this level in a sort of an atmosphere of peace. The soldiers you are fighting aren't expecting to fight while stationed here because it's so far from the front. You are deep behind enemy lines here. You clear the farmhouse, but a German with a Panzerschreck blows a hole in the wall. More Germans have arrived. After dealing with them, more Germans show up, so you go out and deal with them. After that, you move up the road and back into the forest. Here you have another firefight on your hands. Even here we have an incredibly diverse environment that's super fun to move through. In this level alone, you fight in the forest, a farm, a train station and a bridge. You get to the railway after that, you follow it through a tunnel where you get to the train station and have yet another firefight. After that, you get to the bridge where you plant the charges, and I love the sense of urgency I got from listening to the train close in as I was placing the charges. You blow the bridge and make your way back. But now, with all the ruckus you've made, the Germans are on to you. A German patrol arrives immediately as you leave the bridge. Soon after, you get this really cool part where you're hiding in the forest and a German patrol searches for you with their lights, like in the beginning. It happens again shortly after. You fight your way back to the farm and steal a truck to escape. There's a short chase sequence and Ingram tells you you ought to join the SOE and the mission ends. This mission was great as well. It had what made the American missions great. The tension that arose from the Silent Night setting gave this entire mission a very unique atmosphere that I feel sets it apart from everything else. We skip ahead to the 12th of July, 43. Doyle is now officially a part of the SOE and is about to embark on his first mission. You have to blow up a lighthouse as a distraction and then blow up some coastal guns. The first thing I noticed is that the date they give doesn't make any sense. This mission is supposed to be taking place before Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, but it takes place on the 12th of July. Operation Husky started on the 9th, so at this point the invasion has been ongoing for 3 days. Anyways, let's get into it. You disembark on a small harbor. You have this really cool silent Sten gun. This is a real gun that was used by the SOE in 1943, so they got that right. First you take out 2 Germans in this house, then you approach a bunker. You have your first firefight here. Then you get on a truck to go to the lighthouse. Once you get there, another firefight ensues. You fight your way into the lighthouse, and as you move up, you place charges at various spots inside the lighthouse. After planting the charges, you go up these narrow paths towards the fort. The lighthouse blows up, and with the Germans distracted, you enter the fort. First you take out the guys in the fort and destroy some radios, then you enter the bunker below. And after some much appreciated classic FPS design, you get to the guns. I actually had some ammo issues during this part. You blow them up and return to make your escape in the sidecar of a motorcycle. But on your way out, your mates in a separate car gets blown up. Now only you and Ingram are left. Now this mission is kinda like the Either Dam or Turpitz mission, but I do like how you're actually a part of a squad here, so you don't really feel like this single super soldier that's going around mowing everyone down. It's sort of, these are highly skilled soldiers that are in a squad doing this mission. You start by being chased on the motorcycle. You get to a town where you crash. In this mission you have to get to a harbor and steal a boat. Now you're being chased through this claustrophobic town. I like that they made the town feel so tight. It gives this feeling that it's swarming with crowds. Towards the end, you get to this part where you're being chased down a cliff. Eventually you get on a boat, and after taking out some fucking PT boats, the mission ends. And with it, the British campaign. I definitely like the American campaign more, but there's still a lot to like here. The bomber mission was really well executed, and the mission with the resistance was just chef's kiss. I really like the premise of doing these sabotage missions with some resistance fighters. What I liked about the SOE missions is that unlike the ones in the base game, I didn't feel like a super soldier here. In the Sicily one, you have an entire squad, and even though they're highly skilled, that didn't stop the Germans from blowing up the majority of them. During the escape, you just run away and only fight back like 2 times or something like that. You just feel like you got insanely lucky there. In the Soviet campaign, you play as Private Yuri Petrenko. You go through the Battle of Kursk and Kharkov. You start with a briefing. Here you get to know about Operation Citadel, where the Germans try a counteroffensive near Kursk. But what the Germans don't know is that the Soviets have built layer upon layer of fortified defensive positions.
Keep your head down!
The mission starts a bit like the Volga mission in the base game. You disembark from a train and get in a truck where you're driven to the front. This truck ride is super well done. Shells are going off all around you and Stukas are harassing you. It's terrifying. After arriving, you have to defend the trenches. This part is insane. The Germans really give you everything they've got in a last desperate attempt to gain the offensive. After defending the right flank, you get word that the left flank isn't doing so well. You fight your way through the trenches to reinforce them. When you arrive on the left flank, you see a flamethrower for the first time. After pushing them back, elephant tanks show up. You have to go out there and blow them up. The part where you crawl out into no man's land, to my surprise, didn't feel empty. You would think that after what we've been through, but no. As a matter of fact, this entire battle feels massive. After you're done in the trenches, the Germans try to flank through a village. You have to go there and push them back. The fighting on the way over there is pretty well done. You're moving through this vale and the Germans emerge on the hills around you and attack you. When you get there, you get new orders in a shed. You have to clear the village and hold the bridge. You fight through this small Russian village, and by the end you have to hold it for 2 minutes. After that, reinforcements arrive and you win. Trenches continue the trend of dynamic, interesting environments. This was the first time while making this video that I felt like I truly took part in a massive battle. The level also has great atmosphere. The overcast sky and the dead trees really gives this almost stereotypical Eastern European fall feeling to it. You start by advancing on Ponyuri behind some tanks. You fight through this train station, you flank around, and the train station is yours. Now it's time for some room-to-room fighting as you clear out this building. Now we get to another one of my favorite moments in the game. That is where you leave the train station and get into the town itself. You have to cross this small river to get to the actual streets. Eventually you get to this machine gun where you flank through the building. Right after that you encounter a panzer, you flank around one more time to take it out. Now you only have one target left, the factory. It's a fierce fight, but you're making progress. You get to this open area where your comrades break through the wall as well, and a big firefight breaks out. Then in the midst of it, a tank arrives. You blow it up with a Panzerfaust and Ponyuri is yours. This mission didn't really do anything extraordinary in my eyes. It had some cool moments and kept the atmosphere from the previous level. Right now I'm really noticing the length of these missions. We're 2 missions into this campaign and I've been playing for an hour.
Hunters! Ambush! Spread out! Move!
This is another tank mission. This mission combines the elements from the 2 in the base game. You're gonna be fighting tanks in open fields and traversing villages and ruins where infantry will try to get you with Panzerfausts. You'll also be taking on flak and field guns. This mission is a little harder though, but it continues the trend with the base game where this game just feels a lot more big. And all in all, this is a great mission. In this mission, you're assaulting Kharkov. And to once again bring up the Soviets' reliance on artillery, in this mission you move from house to house and call in artillery on anti-tank guns as you and your tanks make your way deeper into the city. Towards the end, you get into a firefight in this courtyard. I really like the setting of this level. It has a completely new atmosphere. The way the smoke and fire blackens the sky and the fresh rubble and loud noise from the battle. Stalingrad felt like a city well into post-mortem, and Kharkov feels like it just died. The mission starts with you assaulting this town square while approaching the station. It's a fierce battle. You hop on the flak to shoot down some bombers and then you move towards the station. When you get there, you once again have to hold them back until reinforcements arrive. This part was also super hard for me. You have to hold back the infantry as well as use an 88 to shoot tanks. While all of this is going on, a Stuka will routinely strafe the platforms, and you have to guess which one and take cover. After that mission is over, so is the campaign. This campaign was just awesome. It had huge battles, great atmosphere and great level design. It was everything this game should be. Now that we've gone through both games, it's time to talk about what we just experienced. This game is great, even today. Infinity Ward set an ambitious goal of creating a grounded World War II experience and they achieved it. But to me, it's United Offensive that really completes the vision and sets an example for this series to come. Call of Duty does many groundbreaking things for its time. It sets itself apart from other shooters by humanizing your squad. Everyone in your squad is given a name and some health, and they aren't immortal. This does more for the tone of the game than any kind of environmental design would. War is an indifferent, unbiased killer. You could be highly skilled and do everything right and then still catch a stray bullet or shell. This game really shows how most people in war die from simply being at the wrong place at the wrong time. When I was researching for this video, I found out that the original idea of making a video game set in World War II was perceived as insulting by many publishers, because back then people saw video games as more of a plaything rather than an art form or entertainment media. I think this game does a lot to counter that while still offering fun arcade-like gameplay. This game wasn't successful because it trivialized World War II, but because you got to look at history through the eyes of someone that took part from the comfort of your own home. This was the first game to really place you on the front lines of World War II in an FPS. I want to answer a question that I had while playing through this game. This question has probably been asked by many throughout Call of Duty's lifetime. Is this pro or anti-war? To me, this game is neither pro nor anti-war, it's pro-bravery. The game is almost adorable in its admiration of the bravery of these soldiers who fought a terrifying war against one of the most evil regimes to ever rise to power. It is worth noting that the depiction of the war itself is terrifying and depressing in these two games, so if I had to say, it would probably lean more towards anti-war. This video was a lot of fun to make. I want to keep this series going. The next video, however, will not be a card video. I want to run a series alongside this one where I look at how the Swedish development company Frictional Games redefined the survival horror genre. So the next video will be on Penumbra Overture, but that's all for this video. Bye!